the Father and the Son look like each other, that the Father and the Son are interested in human beings on an individual basis, that the Father knows us by name. Joseph learned that the Godhead is not an ethereal philosophical concept, but that there are specific members of the Godhead, the presidency of heaven, if you will. He learned that our Father in heaven loves his Son, his beloved Son, but also comes to bear testimony, to bear witness of the Son and the power that the Son can have in our lives. This was a vision like no other. Additionally, Joseph learned that Jesus is the Christ, that he was crucified for the sins of the world, that atonement was very real and very personal. It was not a philosophical concept, nor was it a symbolic concept, that it literally happened. Joseph learned that his sins could be removed. And this first vision happened in a real place, at a real time. President Gordon B. Hinckley has said that the sacred grove where Joseph had his first vision is the crown jewel of church history sites, because it is the only place we know of where the Father and the Son actually came and appeared to a mortal being. And that makes all the difference, and will make all the difference in the world to those that follow the teachings of the prophet Joseph Smith.
We do know that at the conclusion, as the light ascended, as he was left alone, he said, "I found myself lying on my back." He was undoubtedly mentally and physically exhausted by the experience. Whatever that case may be, found that he had to rouse himself and go into the house, and still in a dazed condition, he leaned on the mantle, and his mother came in and said, "What's the matter, Joseph?" And he said, "All's well, everything's all right. But I know for myself that Presbyterianism is not true." He's not singling out a particular religion in that sense. He would have said that about whatever denomination he announced to his mother. There is an element there of trying to coach his mother and to let her know, because she is a Presbyterian.
I believe that he held the instruction that was given to him in the grove very close to himself, and did not share it much. He did with the Methodist minister, and he did apparently with others. But he did say in his 1832 account that there were none who believed. I think he carried this burden for the most part on his own shoulders by himself, and it must have been a horrendous challenge and experience for him to do so, a growing experience.
It seems as though the adversary was aware at a very early period of my life that I was destined to prove a disturber and an annoyer of his kingdom. Else why should the powers of darkness combine against me? Why the opposition and persecution that arose against me almost in my infancy? Though I was an obscure boy, only between 14 and 15 years of age, and my circumstances in life such as to make a boy of no consequence in the world, yet men of high standing would take notice sufficient to excite the public mind against me, and create a bitter persecution. And this was common among all the sects, all united to persecute me. It caused me serious reflection then, and often has since, How very strange it was that an obscure boy of a little over 14 years of age, and one too who was doomed to the necessity of obtaining a scanty maintenance by his daily labor, should be thought a character of sufficient importance to attract the attention of the great ones of the most popular sects of the day, and in a manner to create in them a spirit of the most bitter persecution and reviling. But strange or not, so it was, and it was often the cause of great sorrow to myself.
During the 3.5 years following Joseph's first vision, the Smith family continued to work on their 100 acres to clear land and fence it. They planted crops and tapped trees for maple sugar. Primarily, they made their livelihood through day labor, hiring out as opportunity permitted. Surely during this period, young Joseph would have continued studying the Bible, trying to understand his role in God's plan. In September 1823, Joseph received that understanding. He learned that God had a work for him to do.
It's been 3 years since the first vision. It's a Sunday evening, September 21st, 1823. Joseph is 17 years old. We wish we had more detail about what Joseph and his family had been doing that day, but surely because of their religious nature, they had laid aside their work, and it had been a day for thought, perhaps scripture reading and contemplation. Joseph has obviously, as he recounts, been stirred to do some thinking about his life and his standing with the Lord. And this would lead him to engage in prayer and petitioning with the Lord after he's retired that evening.
While I was thus in the act of calling upon God, I discovered a light appearing in my room, which continued to increase until the room was lighter than at noonday, when immediately a personage appeared at my bedside, standing in the air, for his feet did not touch the floor. He had on a loose robe of most exquisite whiteness. It was a whiteness beyond anything earthly I had ever seen. Nor do I believe that any earthly thing could be made to appear so exceedingly white and brilliant. His hands were naked, and his arms also a little above the wrist. So also were his feet naked, as were his legs a little above the ankles. His head and neck were also bare. I could discover that he had no other clothing on but this robe, as it was open so that I could see into his bosom. Not only was his robe exceedingly white, but his whole person was glorious beyond description, and his countenance truly like lightning. The room was exceedingly light, but not so very bright as immediately around his person. When I first looked upon him, I was afraid, but the fear soon left me.
And it was at this time that Joseph would begin to recognize that angels don't need to have doors nor windows to enter, and they don't leave holes in the walls or ceilings as they come and go, and also that he would recognize and understand that they're only going to be seen by whom they want to be seen, and that their presence did not need, and in fact did not disturb the others, his brothers who were with him perhaps in the same room. And we also recognize that he learned that when an angel comes, he comes with a mission and with a purpose.
This messenger introduced himself as Moroni, and then he said something most remarkable to this young 17-year-old. He told Joseph that his name was going to be had for good and evil among all nations, kindreds, tongues, and people, which must have surprised Joseph. He also told him about a record that had been kept by the early inhabitants of America that he, Moroni, had deposited in a hill near Joseph's home, and that in that record it contained the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ. He also told Joseph there would be an instrument, seer stones, that would help Joseph to translate the record. Afterwards, he began quoting prophecies from the Old Testament, particularly from the book of Malachi, and then later from Isaiah and the book of Acts, and telling Joseph that he was going to be part of the fulfillment of those prophecies from the Bible.
After Moroni had shown Joseph Smith where the plates were hidden in vision, then the light gathered in around Moroni, and he ascended on a conduit of light out of the room. So 3 times in that evening the angel would appear, repeating all that he had been told in the first occurrence, and each successive time adding new information.
One might wonder why, 3 times, this pattern of repetition